$1.75 billion. Two of the most accomplished leaders in entertainment and technology, a launch slate with Steven Spielberg, LeBron James, Chrissy Teigen, and Reese Witherspoon. 6 months later, it was dead. Here's what everyone says killed Quibi: the pandemic. Bad timing. People weren't commuting, nobody needed short-form content on their phone when they were stuck at home with a flat screen. Here's the real problem. That explanation is comfortable, clean, an act of God, not a failure of leadership. It lets the people in charge off the hook. Not the app, not the pandemic. The thing that killed Quibi was baked in before they raised a single dollar, and it was the very thing they were most proud of. In January 2020, Jeffrey Katzenberg walked onto a stage at CES and told the world that Quibi would be what Google is to search. He wasn't being hyperbolic, he meant it. This was going to be the third era of entertainment, after movies, after television, the era of Quibi. The room was full of investors who had written checks totaling $1.75 billion. The founding team included Meg Whitman, the former CEO of eBay and Hewlett-Packard, one of the most respected operators in Silicon Valley. The content slate had Spielberg, Guillermo del Toro, Antoine Fuqua. Chrissy Teigen got a courtroom show. Reese Witherspoon narrated a nature documentary for $6 million. There was no scenario in which this failed, except it did. By October 2020, 199 days after launch, Quibi announced it was shutting down. $1.75 billion evaporated, and Katzenberg went on television and said 5 words that revealed more about the failure than any autopsy ever could. I attribute everything that has gone wrong to coronavirus. Everything. Let's be clear about something. The pandemic did not help Quibi. A mobile-only platform designed for commuters launched the same month the entire world stopped commuting. That's not nothing, but here's what gets missed. A month before the shutdown, Katzenberg was asked whether the pandemic would hurt Quibi. His answer? The opposite. Consumption of video content on the phone is through the roof. People are watching much more content on their phone in their in-between moments. You don't have less in-between times now, you have more. Same leader, same product. Coronavirus went from "this will help us" to "this is the only reason we failed," in a matter of weeks. That's not analysis, that's outsourcing accountability. Let's walk through what actually broke. Decision 1. Mobile only, no exceptions. You couldn't watch Quibi on your TV, you couldn't cast it, you couldn't screenshot it, you couldn't even share a clip with a friend. In a moment when the entire world was locked inside with their largest screens, Quibi locked users inside their smallest one, on purpose. Decision 2. Premium paywall, 0 free tier. $4.99 with ads, $7.99 without. Meanwhile, TikTok and YouTube were free, infinite, and already in your pocket. Quibi had to be better than free. It wasn't. Decision 3. Content nobody asked for. Here's a test. Name one Quibi show. You can't. And that's the point. They spent $100,000 per minute on content that generated 0 cultural conversation. No memes, no water cooler moments, no "did you see that?" Because you literally couldn't show anyone. But these aren't random mistakes, they're symptoms. When you raise $1.75 billion before writing a single line of code, something strange happens. You stop asking questions. You stop testing assumptions. Because testing implies uncertainty, and uncertainty doesn't sell a $1.75 billion vision. Katzenberg had spent 45 years at the top of Hollywood: Disney, DreamWorks, The Lion King, Shrek. He was one of the most successful entertainment executives in history. Meg Whitman built eBay from 30 employees to 15,000. She ran Hewlett-Packard through its most turbulent decade. She was the definition of operational excellence. On paper, this is the dream team. In practice, it was the problem. Here's why. When two leaders with that much track record agree on something, nobody in the room says, "But what if we're wrong?" Not the junior product managers, not the marketing leads, not the investors who wrote the checks. Annie Duke, the former poker champion and author of Thinking in Bets, put it this way. Take two managers. Manager A is 100% confident, just because. Manager B is 70% confident and can explain what they're unsure about. Who do you trust? Most people trust Manager B. Katzenberg operated like Manager A. In a podcast interview months before launch, he was defensive, absolute, dismissive of doubt. When pressed on why Quibi would win, he didn't give data, he gave his resume. Here's my experience from 45 years of being in storytelling.
There's a name for this pattern.
It's called the competence trap. The more successful you've been, the harder it is to see when you're wrong, because your entire identity is built on being right. Katzenberg and Whitman didn't fail because they were incompetent. They failed because they were so competent that they stopped listening. Here's where we land. Deep breath. The thing Katzenberg and Whitman sold investors wasn't the app. It wasn't the content. It wasn't turnstile technology, which, by the way, was tied up in a patent lawsuit from the day they launched. What they sold was themselves. Jeffrey Katzenberg, Meg Whitman, a combined century of winning. You don't bet against that. And investors didn't. $1.75 billion says they didn't. But here's what nobody asked. What happens when the thing that made you successful becomes the thing making you blind? Speed without structure is destruction in disguise. Quibi didn't fail slowly over years of bad decisions. It failed because every decision was made fast by two people who had never been wrong enough to learn how to be wrong. Not because they ran out of customers, not because the product didn't work, not because the pandemic was unfair, but because, when you're Jeffrey Katzenberg, nobody tells you no, and when nobody tells you no, you stop asking the one question that keeps companies alive. What if I'm wrong? If you're building something right now, a company, a channel, a team, here's the thing to sit with. The moment you become the smartest person in the room is the moment you need to find a different room. Katzenberg and Whitman didn't need better ideas. They needed someone they respected to look at the numbers. The App Store ratings falling off a cliff, the retention collapsing after the free trial, the content generating zero cultural signal, and say the words nobody in that building was willing to say. This isn't working, and we need to change course. Nobody said it, so Quibi died. Not the app, not the pandemic. The best leaders in the room, and nobody willing to tell them the truth. That's the real cost of success.